Have you ever wondered why people keep throwing out insane Bitcoin price targets? Today I'm going to unpack what's actually behind these moonshots projections, the models, the assumptions, and the logic used when some calls sound borderless impossible. We'll talk about digital scarcity, why it matters, and how it can shape Bitcoin's price over time. And at the end of the show, I'll show you one of the craziest metrics out there right now, which almost no one is talking about. I'm RK, your host here at the Pioneers of Bitcoin podcast. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone to another episode here at the Pioneers of Bitcoin podcast. Today is November 28th, 2025, and we're at Bitcoin price at 91,500 US dollars. And we have a couple of interesting topics to talk about, and I wanted to become a little bit philosophical today, but also not only philosophical, but we're going to talk about some metrics that people use and get very excited about, and sometimes become so crazy that they project Bitcoin prices of millions of dollars that we will probably see next year as per their projection, which doesn't sound always realistic, but I'll try to explain the passion that actually comes into play once you actually see the logic behind projections like that. So first things first, I would like to show you as a reminder this chart. This is the Bitcoin price chart since the beginning of its inception, since 2009, and this is astronomical. This chart is probably the most beautiful chart in finance today. And you have to ask yourself, how is this even possible? How can an asset go from literally nothing to over $100,000 per unit in just 17 years? There is actually a very, very good reason behind this, and we're going to talk about it today. But a lot of people who are especially Bitcoin skeptics don't know about these metrics, and they don't even want to know because they want to stay ignorant for some reason. But we're going to shed some light to these metrics today. And the first thing I want to talk about is the concept of digital scarcity and why this is so important. So let's talk about a couple of other markets. Let's start with gold. So what I did here, I just typed here on Google amount of gold mined in the past 5 years. Very, very simple term, right? Very, very, very simple metric. And as you can see, first of all, we don't know how much exactly gold was mined because the gold market is not very transparent. You don't know how much gold has been mined. But there's approximations, and approximately 16,000 to 17,000 tons of gold were mined globally over the past 5 years. And if you think about that, that's a lot of gold. That's actually a lot of gold. And this asset is thousands of years old, and we keep finding more and more of it. And you can see that every year we actually find at least 3,000 tons of new gold, and we add to its existing supply. And then you have to ask yourself, why does that happen? Well, because if the incentive exists, the supply will follow. Let me repeat that. If the price of any form of asset is high enough, then there is an incentive to find more of that asset or to produce more of that asset. Very, very, very simple. And the same happens with gold. Its supply is is still limited because gold is very hard to mine, but still there's always more gold that we find on planet Earth, and maybe, who knows, we'll find more outside of this planet in the future. I was actually driving my Tesla today and I was thinking about this. Like, Tesla has grown from a very niche car company to a really one of the most popular car companies in the world. And if you think about it, the price of Teslas has not skyrocketed. And you have to ask yourself, why? Well, because the company is producing every year more and more cars. Very simple. So 2020, they produced 500,000 new cars. In 2021, it was almost a million. In 2022, it was 1.3 million. 2023, it was 1.8 million. And 2024, again, almost the same number, around 2 million. So every single year, as there is more demand, the company produces more and monetizes the demand and capitalizes on the demand that exists in the market. So the more demand, the more supply there is going to be, because there is an incentive to produce more. Very simple logic. Same goes for homes. If you just look at the numbers of new homes being built, obviously the dollar price of homes have increased, but also the supply of new homes has increased. So 2019, the US built nearly 5 million new housing units between 2020 and mid-2023, with an annual average of around 1.6 million new units for the past 2 years. I live in the UAE. It feels like there is a new building every 6 months. This is how quickly they're building here, because there is demand. So you see, demand, or actually supply, follows demand. That's true in every single market, anywhere you look at. And it makes sense, actually, why that's the case. And still, prices are going up. Think about that. Because usually when supply goes up, the price should actually go down, right? It should become more affordable because there's more available. But prices also go up because there is infinite amount of dollars. But that's another story. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Now, I want to talk about a concept that many people, including myself, have a very difficult time to understand. And that's the concept of an inelastic supply. Up until the discovery of Bitcoin, we actually never had a concept of an inelastic supply. Why? Very simple. Because for any commodity, for any good, for anything that we have ever consumed on this planet, there's always been more supply as demand went up. Unless there was artificial scarcity, right? So for example, there is a company called Rolex, as you know. They produce very, very scarce watches. Well, it's only scarce as long as this company decides them to be scarce, because that company is the producer of that watch. And at any point in time, they could decide to change that and to produce more watches and basically meet the demand. But they strategically don't do it because of marketing and strategic reasons. But you have to have trust in Rolex not to do that. Correct? So that is an artificial scarcity. It's not real scarcity. The only real scarcity we've had so far on planet Earth has been with gold. Because no matter how much the price of gold has gone up over time in the past hundreds of thousands of years, we never found any way to massively overproduce gold. And there is approximately 2% of new gold in supply every year. So that's the only commodity that made it, if you will. Now, what has changed since 2009 is that we actually now have a commodity that we have to be fair. At the beginning of Bitcoin, there was a central entity. There was one person who knew about it. And if that person would have changed the supply right at the beginning when nobody cared, we would not have the supply of 21 million Bitcoin today. We would have more. We might have less. But because of its natural distribution, and like many Bitcoiners say, like fire, this has spread over its network to so many new computers and so many new users that its core supply of 21 million can no longer be changed, which is absolutely crazy. So this was very hard for me, to be honest. At the beginning, when I was new to Bitcoin, it was very hard for me to understand. I understood that there is a limited supply of Bitcoin, but it was very hard for me why that, or how that was actually enforced. And how is it actually possible that there is never going to be more than 21 million Bitcoin? If the founder comes out one day and says, hey, there's going to be 25 million Bitcoin, why wouldn't there be more than 21 million Bitcoin? And once you realize that decentralization, the concept of decentralization makes this supply absolutely uncorruptive, you start to realize what a miracle this discovery actually is. Because no matter who comes at the Bitcoin network, if they want to change the supply of Bitcoin, they will have to convince everybody else, or at least the majority of the network, to change that supply, which is impossible to do. Like, nothing is impossible. There's also a possibility that the planet will vanish tomorrow. But it is extremely unlikely that this is ever going to happen. Why? Because there's so many users and there is consensus among so many users that we will never have more than this amount of coins, which makes it the first asset or the first commodity that has a supply schedule which is inelastic. And let me explain what I mean by that. Remember the gold, remember the houses, remember the Teslas? It does not matter how high this price actually goes. I mean, latest when Bitcoin was at $1 and it went to $100, we should have had millions of new coins in supply because people got so rich and they would have tried their best to mine as much Bitcoin as they could to dump it on that price. But because of Bitcoin's rules and consensus rules that exist with the difficulty adjustment and the supply schedule, nobody can produce more than a number that is predetermined by the protocol. Which means that no matter how much demand there is for this asset class or for this commodity, the supply is absolutely capped at a fixed unit, independent of how much demand there is. And we know that with certainty because the network is transparent. Everybody can go online, everybody can download the Bitcoin node and verify it on his own, how many coins exist, how many coins will exist this year, how many coins will exist in 5 years, and how many coins will exist in 100 years and in 1,000 years. Everything, there's no backdoor, there's no secret in Bitcoin. You can verify every single rule that exists in Bitcoin on your own with your own Bitcoin node. Completely trustless. You cannot do that with gold. You have to trust these numbers that you find online, but you cannot verify these numbers on your own. Okay? This is absolutely crazy. This is a miracle. Honestly, I've been in Bitcoin since a very long time, and up until today, every time I think about this, it is absolutely insanity that we are actually living through this miracle of absolute scarcity, absolute digital scarcity. And you see here, this is the supply of Bitcoin. The blue one is the supply of Bitcoin. And you see the first few years, we had a lot of it. But as time went by, the curve starts to go to the right, and at some point, we're going to reach the maximum number of coins, which is 21 million. And we are somewhere here right now. Okay? We are at almost 2026, and we've already reached 95% of the total Bitcoin supply that will ever exist in human history, which is absolutely crazy. And the red line that you see is the inflation rate. You see it's collapsing. The inflation rate is going down to 0. Okay? So the price of Bitcoin, if you look at it, and if you measure it with this unit, which is the dollar, you see this is the unit of new dollars, and this is the unit of new Bitcoin. On the left is the unit of new Bitcoin. On the right is the unit of new dollars. Every time you look at the Bitcoin price, every time you look at this chart, and you see it went from $100 to $1,000 from $1,000 to $100,000, what you're literally doing is you are measuring this number of coins that are non-manipulative, nobody can change the numbers that exist here. But this number is being massively changed over time, especially during crisis like we had in 2008, as you can see here, and 2020. You see, it's an exponential number right up to infinity. It just keeps going higher and higher and higher, and it's never going to stop. But this unit is going to stop. So that's actually pure mathematics. If you measure this unit with this unit, you are going to see exponential prices higher and higher and higher and higher over time. When it will reach $10 million, when it will reach $2 million, when it will reach $500,000, these are just guesses, and nobody knows exactly when. But one thing that everybody knows is that this curve is always going to go higher, and this curve is always going to go lower until it reaches 0. And we've already reached 95% of all coins. So there is only 5% left. Only 5%. You see here, this is 2026. We're here right now. The inflation rate of Bitcoin is officially almost at 0 already. So this is what people who say Bitcoin could go to 1 million, Bitcoin could go to 2 million, Bitcoin could go to 10 million. This is what people look at, because this is not some company that can monetize on this unit and exponentially or change this number at will. Nobody can change this number at will. If Bitcoin goes to $10 million tomorrow, nobody can add more Bitcoin into its supply. And you see, compared to Teslas, compared to number of houses, this is the absolute predictable units of new Bitcoin that you can just ChatGPT it yourself and ask your AI to tell you exactly how many will exist. The only asset that it will be able to tell you is Bitcoin, because everything else would be just a guess. And you see, 2016, we had 1 million Bitcoin for the entire year. And we had for 4 years I mean, this is counting obviously the beginning of the year as well, because at the beginning of the year, there were 25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And then we had the halving, we had then 50% of that. So that's why we have 1 million here. And then it halves and goes to 12.5 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And we only had 657,000 Bitcoin per year until 2020. Then we had another halving, which basically is a rule in Bitcoin where we cut the new Bitcoin supply in half every 4 years. That's what's happening, right? And you see, the supply halves every 4 years. We went from 657 in 2019 to 328,500 every year in 2021. And now we are at 164,250 Bitcoin per year. And in 2028, there will be the next halving, and we will go down from 164,250 per year to 82,125 Bitcoin per year. And the miracle here is nobody is able to change this, because there is no Tesla company that will meet the demand of new cars. There is no gold miner that will find some gold and mine it because the price of gold has skyrocketed. And there is also nobody in control to actually build new Bitcoin because there is more demand for it, like housing. You see, this is what makes Bitcoin so special, and this is the reason why you see astronomical projections of $1 million Bitcoin, $2 million Bitcoin. Because if you really deep dive into this digital scarcity aspect of Bitcoin, it's actually mind-boggling what prices you will get. One metric that I saw that really blew my mind is this metric. So take a look at this. This is a chart that shows the cost for all of the Bitcoin in existence. So what did we just learn? We have already 95% of all the Bitcoin in existence. Okay. Now, if we have 95% of all Bitcoin in existence, take this let's say there's 20 million Bitcoin. Okay. So that's 95% of it. 71% of all of this supply that exists today was purchased at over $85,000 per Bitcoin. Let me repeat. 71%. This is actually crazy. 71% of all the Bitcoin that exists today, that is in circulation today, was bought at a higher price than $85,000. Which means that if the Bitcoin price goes below that price, below $85,000, over 70% of all the Bitcoin that we have in circulation will be at a loss. Now let's unpack what that means. If you listen to my previous podcast, you will understand how Bitcoin rotates hands, right? So you have people who bought Bitcoin many years ago. The price of Bitcoin goes higher, they sell. There is not enough new supply, right? So the only way to actually buy the Bitcoin is from either existing holders or Bitcoin miners that are mining new Bitcoin. That's the only way. But this metric is showing that most of the Bitcoin that we have right now in existence were bought at over $85,000. So the Bitcoin price lower than that will have so many of the Bitcoin UTXOs at a loss that it makes it highly unlikely that they will be sold at a loss, right? Because this is human psychology. If people are in profit, they want to take profit. But if people are in loss, I mean, there's always market actors who sell at a loss. But if you look at who is in the market now with IBIT, with BlackRock and all the pension funds, and now nation states, now Texas, now all the institutional buyers who are not retail buyers, they're not tourists. They don't have the philosophy of buying and selling over a year. They buy things that they hold for at least 10 years or 15 years. This is the type of absorption or demand that we have right now in Bitcoin. And this metric proves that most of the Bitcoin has been sold at such high prices compared to just 3 years ago, which is absolutely crazy how bullish this is. This indicates obviously that this could be the floor of the Bitcoin price. This could be the floor of the Bitcoin price, because any price lower than this price means that the majority of people will be at a loss. And if you just study the market long enough, you will know that people hesitate to sell at a loss. People want to sell at a profit. People don't want to sell at a loss. This is something you learn also in banking. I've been in banking in my past, so I know human psychology, especially traders. People hate to sell at a loss. People always limit their profits and they always let their losses go. This is the psychology. This is the number one thing that you learn. I never suggest anybody trading, but if you learn anything from trading, that's let your profits go and limit your losses. That's a number one rule. But that's a different story. So my point here is this is an absolute astonishing bullish metric. I was listening to a podcast today. It was actually Checkmate himself who was talking about this on the What Bitcoin Did podcast. And here this metric, I was like, what? Like, what did he just say? $85,000, 70% of the entire Bitcoin supply. That's absolutely crazy. And yeah, so if you go to higher valuations, then obviously the sell pressure goes up. And this makes actually sense because we've been talking about OGs selling their Bitcoin in the previous episode, and that's actually proof that they have, because 70% of all of the supply is in new hands. How do we know? Because $86,000 is not a price that we saw 4 years ago. This is a price that we saw. Let's actually take a look. When did we see first time 85,000? That was 85,000 was, this is a monthly chart. Let me actually go to the weekly. $85,000 was first seen, yes, in November of 2024. Yeah. November of 2024 was the first time we had this price. So this price is 1 year old. Absolutely crazy. So within the last 12 months, we have rotated 70% of all the Bitcoin supply to this price. Now, this is actually proof how much demand there is actually, and the rotation of coins from old hands to new hands. Anyways, I thought this would be very, very, very interesting to think about. Obviously, nobody knows the future. Nobody does. But there's always an indication of how things might unfold. And this is a clear indication that the floor price of Bitcoin might have just jumped tremendously. Like the 30K times, the 50K times, the 20K times of Bitcoin are, in my opinion, part of the past. I might be wrong. You never know. The market always has surprises for everybody, but I think they're part of the past. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. just make sure you put any comments that you have about this video, share this video with your loved ones, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really helps with the algorithm to get this video to more people. So I would really appreciate the thumbs up and a subscription and a comment in our video down below. Take care and thanks for watching, everyone. See you. Bye.